Many people wonder how it is to be on top of the world. You could go wherever you wanted to, have whatever you wanted, whether it be money, power, friendships, admiration, and a feeling that no matter what happens, you're untouchable to the world around you. Being at the absolute top of everything is what many would consider to be the perfect life. This is not one of those stories. The man you're looking at is one of the most powerful in the world, but the most powerless at the exact same time. Throughout his life, he's had to kill his best friend, fail to save those around him, and may have even caused the end of the world. But through all of these things, he managed to become a god. And it all starts here, the first sign of his strength. Gojo was born on December 7th, 1989, and from the moment he opened his eyes, it was clear that he would be one of the strongest the world had ever known. As soon as he was born, a bounty of 100 million was put on his head, and he sent his assassins running with a single look of his eyes. Curse users ran rampant in Japan, but the moment Gojo came onto the scene, they went into hiding for over 10 years, and said they never would have came out if he stayed around. People spoke about him as if he shattered every idea people had about strength as soon as his life started. Curses grew stronger to survive, and many activities stopped purely because he existed. When Gojo was born, he changed the balance of the world. Years go by, and Gojo is now one of the strongest on the planet, given a mission that can save or end the world. Their goal is to find Riko Amanai, someone that will merge with Tengen to stop her from going berserk and wiping out humanity. At the exact same time, a man has been working behind the scenes to take away Gojo, his friends, and everything he's ever known. Gojo's mission begins, his closest friend alongside him, but he would learn many things on this mission that he never knew. Gojo was born with the 6 eyes and inherited Limitless as a child, the most powerful combination in the last 400 years. This lets him slow down anyone that tries to touch him to no end, and gives him a wide array of offensive options. He's basically untouchable, which is where most of his arrogance comes from. But what Gojo didn't understand is that he wasn't as untouchable as he believed. A man Gojo hadn't even met took note of him from the moment he was born. A sorcerer from 1,000 years in the past, Kenjaku. Kenjaku has fought 2 separate 6 eyes users and lost, and is on a mission to get rid of them once and for all. All of this spawns from his mission to take Tengen as his own and merge her with all of Japan to create a massive cursed spirit for his own amusement. Kenjaku had many things in mind. His plans were both well on their way and only beginning at the exact same time. Every moment of Gojo's life was under Kenjaku's influence. He was pulling the strings without Gojo even knowing it was happening. He even set up an interference on Gojo and Suguru's mission to get Riko Amanai. To do this, he hired Toji Fushiguro, a man who left the Zenin clan who knew about Gojo since he was a child. A meeting that Gojo didn't remember, but Toji held on to for the rest of his life. After a 3-day mission, Gojo and Suguru played right into Toji's plan without even knowing it. And the moment they thought they were safe is when everything went wrong. Gojo used everything that he knew, but was no match for Toji. As he fights for his life, he's stabbed in the throat, his legs, and straight through the forehead. As the strongest that there was, the moment Gojo fell, others around him began to fall as well. Riko Amanai is gunned down by Toji, and Suguru is left hanging on for his life. All of humanity was at risk now that their mission failed. But Gojo was about to make a major comeback. When Gojo was stabbed in the throat, he put everything he had into staying alive and became a monster as a result. He showed up still wearing his ripped apart clothes in front of Toji. Having tapped into the core of curse energy, all of his wounds healed. He can now use reverse curse technique, so unless you blow up his whole brain at one time, he's gonna keep coming back for more. Gojo had become a monster. But this was far from everything that he could do. Gojo was now something completely different, and Toji was massively underprepared. With his enlightenment came reverse techniques, like Red, that hit Toji harder than he ever expected. Reverse techniques gave him access to much stronger moves, namely Hollow Purple, that merged his red and blue together to make something that only few in the Gojo clan knew. Gojo blasts Toji with Hollow Purple, ending the fight the moment it lands, and his big wins didn't stop there. Gojo was now well above his peers. He became the strongest there was, and that couldn't be denied. He can heal himself around the clock, protect himself almost 24/7, upgraded his use of red and blue, and is even working on domain expansion and long-range teleportation. Gojo's seat at the top was his and his alone, but the question remained, could he stay there for long? And would he overcome Kenjaku's plans? Even with all of that circling around him, something Gojo never expected was well on its way. After the death of Riko Amanai, Suguru spiraled out of control and became twisted and depraved. He became a mass murderer. Gojo confronted Suguru and demanded he explain himself, but Suguru only confirmed his desire to kill billions of people with his own hands. The man that stood in front of him was both his closest friend and a genocidal maniac who had to be put down. Yet when Gojo had the opportunity to kill Suguru, he couldn't bring himself to do it. As you may have expected, this sent Gojo into a heavy depression. He felt more alone than he ever did in his life. Even with him being the strongest, it didn't matter. He could only save those that wanted to be saved. This pushed Gojo to make a decision he'd never made before. He would foster a strong, intelligent group of allies, and never let anyone feel alone again. With Suguru gone, there was no one left to understand him, and he was going to change that one step at a time. Gojo wasted no time with his decision and started turning things around that same year. He went after Megumi Fushiguro, the son of Toji, and took him in as his own. Over the next 10 years, he became a teacher at Tokyo's Jujutsu High and had several students under his wing. This included Maki Zenin, who had potential to be as strong as Toji one day, a cursed speech user, Toji Inumaki, one of Yaga's creations, Panda, Hikari Kenji, who could become immortal, and Kirara, another young talent. Hikari and Kirara were two of his first and graduated into their second year. Megumi had been under Gojo's watch for a decade. His 3 new students were only beginning, and another was on his way. Yuta Kotsu was cursed with a vengeful spirit so strong that he was set to be executed immediately. But where the elders saw danger, Gojo saw opportunity. He sent Yuta on several missions and trained him so he could grow stronger and harness Rika's power for himself. While Yuta did grow more powerful, he was also on Suguru's radar, who wanted to take Rika for himself and kill almost everyone in the world. And Suguru's return was coming very soon. Suguru showed up to Jujutsu High with all the followers he gained over the years and declared war on all of Japan. The Night Parade of 100 Demons was set for December 24th, where 1,000 curses would be released in 2 locations, Kyoto and Shinjuku. The irony of how things turned out was too big to ignore. Suguru, who once spoke about protecting the weak, now wanted to wipe them out. And Gojo, who hated the idea, was now a teacher. But that isn't all there is to the story. If Suguru wins the Night Parade of 100 Demons, he'll move on to wiping people out all over the world. To do this, of course, he would have to kill Gojo, and as a result, Gojo would have to kill Suguru to stop that from happening. 2 people who were the closest friends now had to fight each other to the death. At one point, they took missions together to save the world. Now they're put against each other to stop or cause the end of humanity. No matter who won or lost, on one side, everything they knew would come to an end. After a hard-fought war, Suguru was finally taken to his limit by Yuta Kotsu. Seeing as Suguru was still talking about going after Rika a second time, it was clear that he was too far gone. Even on the verge of death, he refused to give up his ideas of global genocide. There was no point in trying to solve this with another conversation. It was time to put his life to an end. Gojo now had to follow through on a decision that he failed to make 10 years ago. After the 2 exchanged their last words, Gojo kills Suguru with his own hands to stop the world from ever dealing with the threat of his ideals again. He had every opportunity to stop the Night Parade from even happening 10 years earlier, so it's only right that he brings their story to a close himself in the end. While this may sound like it puts an end to the story of Gojo and Suguru, things only get more dark and twisted from there. Kenjaku never stopped watching Gojo, and he had his eyes on Suguru from the very beginning. Suguru had a strong curse technique, curse manipulation, that let him absorb and tame cursed spirits to use their power as his own. Since Riko Amanai never merged with Tengen, Tengen evolved into more of a cursed spirit than a human being, and could be absorbed by Kenjaku at any point in time. All he needed was to wait for the chips to fall, and they fell exactly how he wanted them to. Kenjaku survived the last 1,000 years thanks to his curse technique, which is still unnamed. His technique lets him take out his own brain, put it in someone else's body, and take that body as his own. This gives him access to their curse technique, exactly what he needed. And as soon as Suguru died, Kenjaku made his move in the shadows. Taking Suguru's body made Kenjaku immensely powerful. Not only does he have 1,000 years worth of knowledge on Jujutsu, but he's one of the best barrier users on the planet. Combine that with a special grade curse technique, and he becomes a menace for almost anyone he runs into. But what he was about to do goes far beyond simple combat. Kenjaku's plan is to capture Tengen and merge her with all of humanity. Now that Tengen has evolved, she can merge with someone other than Riko in the star plasma vessels. Under Kenjaku's control, Tengen can spread malice to all humanity at the same time and create a curse out of 100 million people's cursed energy. But while Kenjaku was on the move, Gojo was making moves of his own. 6 months later, Gojo's life started moving faster than ever before. He met Yuji, the vessel of Sukuna, smacked around a 5% Sukuna to test his strength, and gave Yuji another one of Sukuna's fingers to make him even stronger. Sukuna is the strongest of the Heian era, like Gojo is the strongest of today, and he vowed to kill Gojo the moment he had a body of his own. Sukuna spooked the higher-ups so much they wanted to kill Yuji right away, but Gojo stopped them and put his faith in Yuji to make Sukuna's power his own. The higher-ups sent Yuji on a mission to kill him while Gojo was away, where Sukuna gets even stronger. Yet Yuji is brought back for reasons that were never explained to Gojo. At the same time, Kenjaku made a deal with 4 special grade curses, the Disaster Curses and Mojito, to get rid of Gojo and bring Sukuna back at full strength. Jogo, the strongest curse in their group, tries to murder Gojo but gets taken down so bad there's nothing left but a head of his body. Gojo trains Yuji for a month and brings him back to show the elders their plan didn't work. The Kyoto Exchange event gets raided by Kenjaku's squad and Gojo stops them with his students, but Mojito makes off with 6 of Sukuna's fingers and the death paintings from Jujutsu High. On top of his students getting so strong, they kill 3 special grades on their own. Gojo's students are making so much progress, his dream of making a strong next generation is getting more real by the second. And what better way to show that off than to pay a visit to the people that tried to end that dream in the first place? The entire Jujutsu world is controlled by a small group of people, known as the higher-ups or the conservatives. They set the executions, control the promotions, the flow of money, everything. The same people that tried to kill Yuta Kotsu, and the same people that got Yuji killed until he was brought back to life. They held a grip on the world, but that balance was about to change. Everything that Gojo has been working toward is finally coming together piece by piece. Gojo's biggest goal over time has been to reset the Jujutsu world. It became corrupt under the higher-ups' rule, and while he could murder all of them any day of the week, no one would support a massacre, and they would be replaced by others with the same views. To counter this, Gojo chose education, and not just the curses, but his students were getting strong enough that it was only a matter of time before that system was brought to its knees. And while this was true, a test for Gojo and his students was on its way. Kenjaku's plans were moving exactly the way he wanted them to. One big thing was left in his way: get rid of Gojo. He was far too strong for any of them, even if they worked together. But with the right plan, they could have him where they wanted him. They surrounded him with civilians to stop him from using his biggest moves, got past his defenses to attack him head on, and started killing people to force him to agonize over how to save them in time. None of this was to beat Gojo. They knew that would never happen. It was to corner him. Against all odds, he destroyed them, smashing Hanami into paste, ripping Jogo's arms off. Choso wouldn't even get near him, and 1,000 of Mojito's transfigured humans were taken down by a 0.2-second domain expansion from the strongest sorcerer alive. He had shown his hand. He was the strongest, but he wasn't invincible. This is exactly where Kenjaku's grand plan comes into play, and where Gojo's life changed forever. After a very impressive unlimited void, Kenjaku comes out of the shadows, shocking Gojo with the body of his dead best friend, bringing 3 years of memories flooding into his mind. Prison Realm, the cursed object Kenjaku hunted down to get rid of Gojo, will seal its target if they stand near it for 1 minute. Normally, getting Gojo to do anything for 1 minute straight is impossible for the disaster curses. But with Suguru's dead body flooding 3 years worth of memories through him, that limit passed a long time ago. It wasn't 1 minute of time in the real world. Prison Realm needed 1 minute to pass in Gojo's mind. Gojo was sealed, and he only had himself to blame. 10 months ago, when he killed Suguru with his own hands, Gojo got sloppy, and that's exactly what Kenjaku needed. After he killed Suguru, he took the body to Shoko, but didn't have Suguru's body destroyed. Gojo's emotions toward his old friend kept the body intact, and that's exactly what Kenjaku took advantage of. Gojo was the strongest, and has been for a long time, but he lost when it mattered the most. His dream had been to make a strong next generation, and he trained his students with that in mind. The strongest of Gojo's students, Yuta Kotsu, was now the best chance that they had. Once he was trapped against his will, he chose to put his faith into his students. They had grown strong. Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara all handled special grade curses. Maki, Panda, and Inumaki were still progressing. Hikari had massive potential, and Yuta had proven himself to be a monster that only got stronger over time, not to mention the other sorcerers who had grown strong over the years. But Gojo's faith may have been short-sighted. Things were going to get dark while he was gone. Gojo, being free, kept peace in all of Japan, and the moment he was gone, all of that shattered. All the curse users that went into hiding when Gojo was a child came out the moment he left, saying they never would have come out in the first place if he was still free. The threats that were held back by Gojo's birth were now mounting up against his students in his absence. But those weren't the only people taking advantage of Gojo not being around. The higher-ups had grown tired of Gojo over the years, and how often he got in the way of their plans. The moment Gojo was sealed, they labeled him a criminal and exiled him from the Jujutsu world. Unsealing him was now a criminal act. His teacher, Principal Yaga, was set for execution, and Itadori Yuji's execution, that he'd been holding off while he was around, was now back in effect. The higher-ups had already gotten Yuji killed once before. They had another chance to take out all of Gojo's supporters and shatter his dream of a new Jujutsu world. Things are going downhill fast, and they only get far worse from here. Just like when he almost died 10 years ago, the moment that Gojo was gone, those around him started dropping like flies. Nobito, Maki, Megumi, and Nanami barely survive against a disaster curse thanks to something completely out of their control, only to be burned alive by Jogo, killing Nobito, injuring Maki, and leaving Nanami barely hanging on to his life, while Megumi was taken outside. Two of the strongest sorcerers left were taken down, and the forces that could take on Kenjaku were thinning out by the second, and the more time went by, the more bodies came. Yuji was almost killed by the death painting Choso, leaving him barely breathing, and the disaster curses took full advantage. Jogo fed him every finger he had left, plus one from Nanako and Mimiko, and Sukuna reached 75% of his strength, going on a rampage and murdering people through Shibuya. Nanami was killed by Mahito, and Todo lost an arm, while Yuji and Megumi were both taken to the edge of what they could do. Gojo's forces had now lost 3 grade 1 sorcerers, and all of his students were now fighting for their lives. And with all the sorcerers thinning out, Kenjaku took full advantage of the opportunity. The disaster curses were all gone. Gojo was sealed. He had no use for Mahito, except for squeezing the life out of whatever use he had left to further his plans. Kenjaku absorbs Mahito with curse manipulation and takes idol transfiguration for a one-time use, awakening 1,000 sorcerers across Japan at a single time. With 1,000 new sorcerers, there'd be even more chaos than there was before. But he didn't only awaken new sorcerers, he brought back some of the strongest people he'd met from the past. And with everything moving in his direction, he was ready to play one of the biggest cards in his hand. He kept Prison Realm with him and made sure Gojo wouldn't fall into his students' hands. The Tokyo and Kyoto students banded together with Choso to take Kenjaku on, but even then, none of them could overcome him and Uraume together. Kenjaku's plans over the last 1,000 years were finally coming into play, and none of Gojo's students could stop him. He released curses and left with Gojo in hand to start the final stage of his plan, going after Tengen and starting the culling games. The higher-ups had grown tired of anyone that got in their way, and with Gojo gone, they were finally ready to make their move. Principal Yaga was set for execution for how close he was to Gojo, a man exiled from the world after he was sealed. He was then hunted down and executed by the higher-ups with the suspicion that he could make an army with his cursed corpses when he refused to tell them how Panda was made. This is something that never would have happened when Gojo was around, which they openly talk about, but it's also evident by the fact that no one touched Yuta Kotsu when he was younger, and they only went after Yuji when Gojo was away, and Yuji's day was coming just like anyone else's. The higher-ups contacted Special Grade Yuta Kotsu to hunt down and kill Itadori Yuji, since they believed he was the strongest man for the job. Yuta finds and kills Yuji, but brings him back to life with reverse curse technique, much to Yuji's surprise. Before he was sealed, Gojo knew something wasn't right about the situation around him, and asked Yuta to look after Yuji if something happened, along with his remaining students. While this may have been a ray of hope, Kenjaku's plans were still underway. What is going on is still a mystery on some fronts, but one person should have enough answers to make that clear: Tengen. the only person they can speak to that's been around as long as Kenjaku, and Kenjaku's biggest target. She explains how Toji killing Riko sent her evolution out of control, going back 11 years ago to the mission that almost got Gojo killed. The death of Riko made Tengen evolve way faster than normal, and she was so close to being a cursed spirit that Kenjaku can absorb her with Suguru's technique at any given point in time. Humanity as a whole is finished if Kenjaku's plans go uncontested. But there is one way to fix this entire situation. Bring back Gojo. Gojo is sealed inside the front of Prison Realm. Tengen has the back. All they need to do is break the seal and Gojo will be back with them. But that's much easier said than done. The seal of Prison Realm can only be undone by Kenjaku since he has the front. Breaking it open by force needs the inverted Spear of Heaven or the Black Rope, both of which Gojo destroyed after beating Toji and after the Night Parade of 100 Demons. There was still a way to free Gojo, but they would have to track it down on their own. Choso and Yuki stay behind as Tengen's bodyguards against Kenjaku, and the world is now on the students' shoulders. Maki slaughters the Zenin clan and gets strong enough to be compared to Toji. Yuji and Megumi recruit Hikari, a man Gojo said had potential to match his own, and Yuta sets off into his own colony. With 1,000 sorcerers, several curses, and some of the strongest fighters that ever existed in their way, Gojo's students needed all the help they could get, and that help had a name: Hanakarusu. Hanakarusu was awakened by Kenjaku as a vessel for Angel, a sorcerer from 1,000 years ago, and the key to the student's survival. The goal is to gather enough points to save Megumi's sister, find Angel, have her erase the seal on the back of Prison Realm, kill Kenjaku, and find a way to end the culling games. Gojo's students were strong, but the odds against them were far out of their range. Sukuna was becoming more of a powerhouse as time went by, and Kenjaku's army was growing stronger by the minute. If anyone was going to take them down at their strongest, it was Gojo alone. Yuta, Hikari, Maki, Megumi, and Yuji all pushed themselves to near death for their goal, and eventually found Hanakarusu. But that was far from being the end of their problems. When Yuji was brought back to life, it was under Sukuna's conditions, ones that Yuji was made to forget through a binding vows rule. This vow was used to take over Megumi at his lowest and force 15 of Sukuna's fingers down his throat, giving Sukuna a new vessel completely under his control. At the same time, Kenjaku defeated Yuki Tsukumo and captured Tengen as his own. Sukuna gets away from Maki and Yuji, sinks Megumi's soul with a ritual, and murders his sister Sumiki to send Megumi even lower and make one of the strongest techniques in the series his own, along with Kenjaku now having everything he needed to start a merger that could wipe all of humanity off the map. But much like 11 years ago, when things got the darkest, Gojo was on his way. After she almost died facing Sukuna, Angel recovers and it's time for Gojo to be unsealed. Shattering Prison Realm with Jacob's ladder, she sets him free. And just like with Toji, the moment he comes back, he goes straight after the person that took him down to begin with, telling Kenjaku his next words would be his last until Sukuna intervenes. Kenjaku did everything he could think of to keep Gojo sealed, but none of it was enough to stop the strongest. And not only that, he now learned that someone he raised for over a decade had been taken over by the one man he needed to kill the most. Even though Gojo and Sukuna swore to kill each other the moment they met, both sides still had things to do. Sukuna still has a binding vow to finish with Kenjaku, and Gojo has other plans. They will fight, but for now it'll have to wait. Suguru's body needs to be laid to rest, and Gojo still needs a train, so he sets the fight for December 24th, the same day he killed Suguru after the Night Parade of 100 Demons. And with that, the fight of a lifetime was set to begin. Gojo and Sukuna do everything they can to get stronger, and cut no corners while doing so. Gojo trains with Gakuganji and Utahime, making plans to take Sukuna down. Sukuna reaches 20 fingers worth of strength after consuming 4 more and the head of his mummified body. Gojo now has everything he needs to take on the strongest sorcerer in history, and Sukuna's curse energy reserves are more than double Yuta Kotsu's, putting them on a completely different level than anyone around them. But as the fight draws closer, Gojo still has one more thing to do. The higher-ups have been a bane on the world for far too long, and it was time to take them out for good. After realizing Gakuganji had changed his ways, he makes him head of Jujutsu headquarters and has all the higher-ups killed. The most corrupt leaders of the Jujutsu world were out of the way, and his dream to reset the world is almost complete. Now all that's left is to take down the biggest threats in his way. December 24th is here, and Gojo takes Ajichi, Gakuganji, and Utsuhime to boost his strength and fire Hollow Purple at 200%, ripping off Sukuna's hands to tell him that he's the challenger here. Gojo has no problem killing Sukuna and thinking about Megami later. He already came back to life once in Yuji's body, so there's no reason for Gojo to hold back at any point in time. The two of them rip through Shinjuku, tearing apart the city along the way, but this is only the beginning. It's time to bring out the strongest techniques they have, their domains. Malevolent Shrine rips through Gojo's unlimited void, but Gojo keeps going, doing several things thought impossible along the way, like healing his burnt out technique and shrinking his domain. Sukuna's biggest advantage in their domain clash is that he has an open barrier, so even with the two of them being equal in raw strength, Gojo's was destroyed because it can be attacked from the outside. But after 3 clashes in a row, Gojo finally found his answer. Gojo finally shatters Malevolent Shrine and will stop at nothing now. The two of them clash domains 2 more times, and he finally lands his technique on Sukuna, flooding infinite sets of information into Sukuna's brain. Every sound, every feeling, and every sensation all at once. Gojo rushes over to rip out Sukuna's heart, lungs, and liver, but is taken back by Mahoraga. He's proven that he's stronger than the King of Curses, but Megami's technique has come into play. Gojo realizes that Sukuna's been using Megami to offload the burden of unlimited void, and even beyond that, something has gone terribly wrong. He goes to use unlimited void for a 6th time in a row, and starts bleeding from his nose, and when Sukuna tries to capitalize, he ends up the same way. Both of them have damaged their brains to a point where they can't even use their domains another time. Gojo from destroying and healing his brain to recover his technique, and Sukuna from taking on unlimited void. Both Gojo and Sukuna have been pushed farther than anyone thought was possible, and the bigger question remains of when will Kenjaku's plan come into play. Even though he's been pushed to near death, this fight has given Gojo something he's wanted for the last 10 years, a rival. His loneliness of being the absolute strongest is something that no one around him would understand. The same loneliness that Sukuna experienced being at the top his entire life. For the first time since he fought Toji, Gojo could seriously lose. And even though this fight may kill him, he's undeniably happy. His isolation had finally been answered. He spent all of his time trying to build someone that could rival him, and Sukuna's who delivered on that feeling all along. From the moment he was born, Gojo was the picture of strength. From the curse users to Toji, the disaster curses, and Kenjaku, Gojo has always been too strong, and it was undeniable that he would be one of the greatest of all time. Against the strongest in history, he's pushed himself to new heights, and came close to beating Sukuna not once, but twice, without 10 Shadows' intervention. With the odds stacked against him, he's ready to bring out a technique that many have never seen before, to take down the King of Curses and the strongest Shikigami of all time. And regardless of whether he wins or loses, Gojo's legacy is set in stone. He's one of the strongest sorcerers that ever lived across history, proved he was stronger than the King of Curses, showed several things that were once thought impossible, and has one of the most broken techniques of all time. Every ounce of potential that he was spoken about having has been proven to be real throughout his life. Now the question remains, will he go out with a bang, or take down everyone that's against him one last time?